During times of fear and uncertainty, how we as individuals respond often will dictate the outcome and what the life trajectory is going to be. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to spend time with you today. But more importantly, I'd like to thank you for giving yourself the opportunity to remain engaged in learning despite the challenging period we find ourselves in. As I reflected this morning, I said, heck, this serves as a living, breathing example of the foundational bricks of this experiment. Since last October, this team has dedicated hundreds of hours toward project design, participant testing, and data analyses, completing data collection on 80 plus human subjects, all the while maintaining their productive academic and professional lives. My heart is full of gratitude to each and every one of these individuals for providing me the opportunity to learn from them. When we go to the foundational theories, the bedrock concepts that really made us start thinking about what we wanted to look at, we think about adaptation to stress and trauma being two separate ones. The cognitive activation theory of stress being the first. So we know that stress is a necessary part of life, right? It happens every day, all day. There's a difference between stress and tension. Stress is good in the right doses. However, when stress becomes sustained, chronic, toxic, quickly transitions from life-saving to life-damaging. So in regards to Kat on the left, how we think about stress here influences how we respond to it, right? This occurs in two ways. So if we think about stress as an opportunity, as a process of training, it'll create resiliency. At least that's how the theory goes. However, if we react to it versus reflecting on it, over time it can create strain, sustained catabolic load on the body, going into neurophysiological dysfunction. It can completely alter the way our body's composition is. But what predicts train versus strain? Well, this can be accounted for by the presence or absence of social support, and then also how we react to the actual environment. So not everyone who has low social support will become reactive. So we see the two separate sides of the curvilinear relationship. We have high support, low stress, and high stress, low support. Our focus is here, down at the bottom of this relationship. Individuals who experience moderate levels of adversity, but we had low reactivity. Moderate levels of adversity. They still experience trauma. They still experience domestic violence in the household, neglect, low SES, XYZ. But there is low reactivity, exhibiting stress adaptation and resiliency. That's our focus. So three other big ideas would be mindfulness skills training, cognitive control, and delay of gratification. So recent research has shown that mindfulness can help or influence the stress response. We can think of mindfulness skills training as awareness of the present moment, and a couple of different big ideas related to attention. So two ways we can measure adaptation to stress are cognitive control and delay of gratification. So awareness of the present moment could also be described as the ability to focus on a single task, while ignoring distracting information, i.e. TV on, social media, phone ringing, but still being able to focus. In our measurement, the emotional flanker task that's impaired by distracting stimuli will be our measurement. And then delay of gratification, we investigated how risk index predicts preservation of resources. For example, if you go and you purchase a cheesecake or my favorite, a key lime pie, could you partition this over 5 days, 6, 7 days, or to be gone in a day? So research supports that early adversity alters future perceptions because for some, future doesn't exist within their mental framework. Cheesecake or the key lime pie would be gone in a day. Big idea here. How does childhood risk predict performance on cognitive tasks and delay of gratification? Essentially, how does resiliency to stress influence better cognitive ability? How do we think? How do we focus? What our attention is? So this is how we're testing our question. Our high-risk sample was randomly separated into two groups, mindfulness and control. So we predicted that resilient individuals would show better cognitive performance and delay gratification, representing an adaptation to stress. As for non-resilient individuals, those who are reactive to their environment would exhibit reduced cognitive performance and non-delay of gratification, representing reduced stress adaptation. So at the start of our experiment and protocol 1, individuals were equally and randomly separated into two different conditions. Our control condition consisted of 39 individuals that watched a TED Talk. Basically, it was an informative TED Talk about what mindfulness was, how to practice it. This was conducted by Shauna Shapiro, lasted approximately 10 minutes in length. Experimental condition, 38 of which watched and took part in a guided meditation practice that was narrated and instructed by John Kabat-Zinn. This was also approximately 10 minutes. So it's the second stage of our protocol. This is the flanker task, the emotional version. This is related to our cognitive control. So for our cognitive measurement, two different manipulations for the flanker task were used. This consisted of pictures, negative and neutral. You see an individual or a man with a gun, and then in the neutral picture, a fan. So different images similar to these, negative and neutral, were shown and employed to measure emotional reactivity. Congruency on the flanker stimulus, this was to operationalize executive attention. So if we see in the congruent, all the arrows are lined up. Incongruent, all the arrows are not lined up. Point of focus or point of attention is the center arrow. Distracting stimuli are those arrows strided on either side of the center. So what we had individuals do is sit down on a computer and they went through 120 of these trials. This represents a single trial. This is the progression. So first, participants saw an image that lasted for approximately 2 seconds or 2,000 milliseconds, followed by a congruency task. So in this one, you'll see an incongruent task focusing on the center arrow. This lasted for approximately 2,000 milliseconds or 2 seconds, followed by a washout slide. So one trial took approximately 2 to 5.5 seconds, again over 120. We then had participants complete self-report questionnaires that gauged histories of adverse childhood experiences and socioeconomic status. ACEs included 10 separate categories. So these took into account different forms of adversity, also known as trauma from the past, consisting of abuse, neglect, domestic violence, divorce, etc. Socioeconomic status reflected in parental education, occupation, as well as others. And our third measurement was demographics, i.e. ethnicity, age, and gender. So the last portion of our protocol was the delay of gratification. So at the end of all of this, we asked each participant what they choose to receive. So what they would choose to see for compensation. So we told them that, hey, you got $5 here and now, or you could have $10 that would be mailed to you 30 days from now. What's your decision? So within a few seconds, we saw that 12 individuals said that they would take $5 here and now, as to where 59 took $10 30 days later. The last part was a debriefing session in which participants were provided information related to the experiment, as well as a list of stress reduction, and behavioral health resources. So our main effect that we saw in our results was a main effect of socioeconomic status on reaction times. So if we think back to congruency versus incongruency, and that, again, that would be congruency and the arrows listed straight across, or the incongruent to where they were in different order. So we saw that as socioeconomic status score increased, risk index, right? So as it increased, we saw a reduction in reaction times. So if we compare congruent versus incongruent, we see that they're clustered here between 4 and 600 milliseconds, or about a half-second response. As we go up in socioeconomic status, and for our incongruent trials, we see that the cluster stretches anywhere between 600 and 1,000 milliseconds, so between a half-second and a full second. Had a fair amount of limitations, but also some good things for future resource in relation to this. So college population showed that SES was the strongest predictor in cognitive performance. Low SES predicts decreased cognitive performance, possibly related to early adversity and different financial resources and availability of resources. Excuse me. Second big idea is that we had a sample bias. The significant limitation in this area is accurate sampling of a representative population. If we think deeply about this, due to the availability of resources, a smaller percentage of college students will have experienced higher risk index. And then for mindfulness, our mindfulness intervention was brief. 8-week interventions are typically used to identify between or within group changes. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to review the dedicated efforts of my team in the Department of Psychological Sciences and the Neuroscience program. If you have any questions, any whatsoever, please direct them to the email listed below, as well as any questions related to research opportunities through the Neuroscience program or the Department of Psychology. Thank you, and have a pleasant rest of your week.